A series of controversies is threatening to derail the opening of Disney's latest big-budget blockbuster. I'm talking about the live-action remake of Snow White, which will be out next week.
Disney's Snow White has always been more than just another fairy tale. It's the original spark that lit the fire of the entire Disney empire, the classic that introduced generations to the magic of feature-length animation. Yet in recent years, that once unshakable legacy has hit a rocky patch. It all started with a bold attempt to update the story for the modern age, propelled by actress Rachel Zgler, an attempt that left fans, critics, and even Disney executives reeling from the backlash. But how did a once beloved tale become such a magnet for controversy? And more importantly, can Disney repair the damage before the iconic Snow White name is tarnished for good? The answers lie in a swirl of dramatic casting decisions, tense behind the scenes negotiations, and revelations about how far modern studios are willing to push an established classic. As tension mounted, fan outrage reached a...
Our fans are growing more concerned about Disney's new Snow White remake, mostly because of what the lead actress has been saying to the press. Rachel Zgler has been described as a walking PR disaster for Disney.
Boiling point. So Disney made a drastic choice. Reboot the reboot. Now a new version is on the horizon, supposedly rooted in the timeless magic of the 1937 original. But will that be enough for an audience eager to see their treasured childhood memories preserved and not replaced by modern commentary? The entire Snow White saga has turned into a cautionary tale about what happens when a beloved story collides head-on with shifting cultural agendas. Long before Disney became the global powerhouse it is today, there was just one bold dream: to bring a German fairy tale about a pure-hearted princess, her dwarf companions, and a jealous queen to life on the big screen. In 1937, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs burst onto the scene. It dazzled audiences, not just because it was the first full-length animated film of its kind, but because it offered a sense of wonder rarely experienced in theaters at the time. Snow White stood for innocence, unshakable optimism, and the belief that goodness would eventually triumph. It wasn't merely an animated movie, it was a cultural milestone that shaped how viewers across the world perceived happily ever after. Over the decades, the film's iconic imagery, Snow White singing with forest animals, the dwarfs with their instantly recognizable names, the evil queen's chilling transformation, lodged itself into the collective imagination. Revisiting a classic of this magnitude isn't a simple task. When Disney decides to tinker with such a beloved cornerstone, it must tread carefully. After all, how do you update a story so intertwined with childhood nostalgia without risking public outrage? It's the kind of high-stakes gamble that could pay off massively if done right, but if mishandled, it can backfire on an enormous scale. And that's precisely what happened once Rachel Zgler stepped into the spotlight, promising a modern spin that fans never asked for.
There's more. There's always more. Let's have a listen.
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story.
When word got out that Rachel Zgler would headline Disney's new Snow White adaptation, many industry insiders initially applauded the choice. She'd been celebrated for her breakout performance in West Side Story, earning a reputation as a rising star. Disney, meanwhile, seemed keen on showcasing a younger, more outspoken actress who could theoretically bring fresh energy to an old narrative. That excitement didn't last. Early interviews painted a picture of a Snow White drastically removed from the gentle fairy tale princess fans remembered. Ziegler's public statements suggested that the prince wouldn't matter, that the story's romance was irrelevant, or even, in her words, awkward. She made remarks about the original film that many interpreted as dismissive, perhaps even condescending, a star stepping into a role cherished by generations, yet openly questioning why it mattered at all. Soon, rumors began swirling that the film would undergo deep revisions, turning the classic story into something unrecognizable. It didn't take long for fans to react. From longtime Disney devotees to casual moviegoers, a collective unease spread across social platforms. People questioned why the studio would greenlight a revision that tore away what made the original so endearing. The situation devolved swiftly as more interviews landed online, featuring Ziegler's commentary on everything from the dwarfs to the romance. There were whispers that her stance aligned with certain progressive factions within Hollywood, fueling a growing perception that Disney's new Snow White was an outright betrayal of the classic's essence.
There were reportedly not even going to be dwarfs either. Rainbow people instead. I thought it was a fan protest. And even the word dwarfs isn't mentioned in this remake. The film has people saying, don't mock sleepy as a neurological condition, and dopey isn't really dopey, that'd be rude.
Disney might have hoped that a vocal minority was behind the initial complaints, but they were mistaken. Criticism mounted, and hashtags began trending non-stop. The outcry wasn't limited to just a few disenchanted voices. It included families who once trusted the brand to provide wholesome entertainment, older fans who grew up adoring the classic tale, and even younger viewers who felt the changes were more patronizing than empowering. Zegler's remarks about the prince, implying a stalker-like relationship in the original, went viral, igniting heated debates over whether she fully understood the film's context or was simply echoing modern critiques without nuance. Some labeled these comments as a brazen dismissal of the 1937 classic's romance, which, although old-fashioned, carried a certain symbolic innocence. Others found her viewpoint refreshing, but poorly timed, especially with the movie's marketing campaign still fresh. Disney's PR team scrambled to control the fallout. Executives hosted urgent meetings to analyze test screening feedback, which apparently registered as lukewarm at best. But by the time the first official trailer dropped, complete with glimpses of a story that barely resembled the original, the damage was done. Fan outrage spread like wildfire, and any attempt by the company to defend the direction only fanned the flames further. Suddenly, the long-awaited live-action Snow White threatened to become one of the biggest misfires in Disney's modern history. Behind closed doors, the panic was palpable. Disney executives found themselves in an unprecedented situation. Not only was a tentpole feature generating massive pushback,
Peter Dinklage questioned why the story even included the characters at all.
They're very proud to cast a Latino actress as Snow White.
Yeah.
But you're still telling the story of Snow White.
Yeah.
Seven Dwarfs.
Sure.
Look, take a step back and look at what you're doing.
But the negative noise refused to die down. For weeks, the story dominated entertainment news cycles. Influencers, film critics, and everyday fans dissected every quote, every leaked detail, every rumor about the film's shift towards social commentary. Those inside the studio said the tension kept growing, with some urging radical changes before release, and others advising they finish what had already been started. Eventually, Disney did the unthinkable. They announced yet another Snow White reboot before the controversial one had even premiered to a broad audience. This effectively undercut the film's momentum and cemented its status as a commercial and critical liability. Though official statements tried to spin the new adaptation as a creative extension or course correction, no one was fooled. Observers recognized that Disney hoped to reclaim the original's integrity while distancing itself from Rachel Zgler's public missteps. Insiders described tense negotiations within marketing and PR departments. Some argued that doubling down on modern themes was the future, while others said it was time to go back to Disney's roots. In the end, management decided to focus on a more traditional storyline, one better aligned with the cherished 1937 narrative. As outrage brewed among fans, the media landscape around Disney began to shift. The same critics who once praised the studio for its willingness to evolve quickly changed their tune once they saw how far from the original story.
They actually just erased the dwarfism side of it, the disability, like we're a disability group. You just erase that whole image.
This adaptation had strayed. Even certain Hollywood activists who typically champion reimagined narratives were unsettled by how jarringly the new film seemed to disregard the old. Meanwhile, rumors swirled that far left-wing producers and even some Disney insiders had turned their backs on the project. Allegedly, Disney canceled a string of Rachel Zgler's media appearances, aiming to minimize more viral soundbites that could further sabotage the movie. People in industry circles whispered about a tense atmosphere where staff was forbidden from discussing certain controversies openly. Merchandise tied to the release fared no better. Retailers reportedly slashed prices, seeing minimal consumer interest. Various Disney watchers pointed to that as a wake-up call. If the brand's core audience had no desire to buy Snow White-themed toys, costumes, or accessories, it signified a deeper breach of trust. The PR missteps had escalated into a full-blown brand crisis, threatening not only the film but Disney's image at large. When the dust finally began to settle, Disney made it crystal clear that a new Snow White project, one with a more faithful take, would soon take flight. Reports emerged that the studio was scouring Hollywood for an actress who exuded a more classic elegance, in direct contrast to Zgler's public persona. Media outlets speculated about a short list of names, though Disney remained tight-lipped. Those rumors weren't confined to the actress alone. Word also spread that Disney was pulling in legacy animators and story consultants, some of whom had shaped the Disney Disney princess aesthetic during the 1990s Renaissance era. The studio hoped these veterans would ensure that any updates fit smoothly into the traditional fairy tale template. This time, the dwarves wouldn't be sidelined or replaced in ways that risk controversy. They'd be approached with a mix of classic imagery and thoughtful modern touches. Furthermore, Disney insiders dropped hints about stricter guidelines for future cast members. According to reports, a new set of media training protocols would keep actors from veering off message in interviews, focusing them on the story's heart rather than personal political stances. After witnessing how quickly an offhand remark can ignite social media, Disney wanted to ensure a cohesive narrative from the entire creative team.
While we're on the subject of actresses and awards and hacks, do we have a moment for Rachel Zgler and Snow White, because there is an update?
At its core, Disney remains a family entertainment giant, and the financial stakes for Snow White are enormous. Merchandise is the lifeblood of any Disney blockbuster. Think figurines, themed bedding, clothing lines, and co-branded fast food tie-ins. When the ill-fated remake's products started piling up unsold in warehouses, it raised alarm bells. Even theme parks witnessed dwindling interest, with fans openly criticizing the film online rather than eagerly snapping up limited edition collectibles. Analysts suggested that the new Snow White reboot represents Disney's chance at redemption. A successful relaunch could restore the brand's authority in princess narratives and erase the sting of recent missteps. But it's also a risky proposition. If Disney misreads audience expectations yet again, it could do long-term damage to the entire princess franchise, a cornerstone of the company's identity since the early 20th century. Meanwhile, fan communities remain vocal. Online forums and social media feeds host endless debates on whether Disney's traditional approach will truly respect the original or simply serve as another attempt at bridging the gap between modern values and classic innocence. "All we want is the magic back," wrote one commenter, echoing a widespread sentiment that Disney had strayed from delivering genuine fairy tale wonder. This outcry underscores how vital it is that the studio gets this next attempt right. For all the turmoil surrounding Rachel Zegler's Snow White, the story isn't just about one actress's missteps or a single film's PR fiasco. It's about the future of how Disney adapts its cherished classics, and whether the Mouse House still has the creative spark to enchant audiences the way it did decades ago.
Rachel Zegler just had one of the most disliked trailers in history with Snow White, but now after all the controversy, she's come out slamming Gal Gadot.
Disney's leadership has learned some painful lessons about fracturing its fan base by prioritizing certain political or social messages over the core fairy tale experience. Insiders note that the upcoming adaptation, targeting a 2027 release, is already generating excitement behind closed doors. Early concept art suggests a return to vibrant forest scenes, whimsical dwarfs each with their distinct personality, and a Snow White that aligns more closely with the original's gentle courage. This renewed focus on authenticity might be exactly what old school fans have been clamoring for. Still, the shadow of controversy lingers. Rachel Zgler, for her part, has kept quiet about the new reboot. Will she speak out? Will the public be willing to forgive Disney and embrace this upcoming version with open arms? The conversation continues across social media, where skepticism mingles with a rekindled hope. If Disney can find a way to channel the very essence of the 1937 film, an innocent princess, a compelling villain, timeless songs, and a hopeful message, there's a good chance the magic can come roaring back. The story of Snow White's tumultuous journey from beloved classic to controversial reboot, and now to a brand new adaptation, reveals just how delicate the balance is when reworking a cultural icon. The original film, an almost sacred piece of animation history, set a gold standard for what a Disney tale could be. Trying to bend that legacy to fit modern narratives proved far riskier than anyone at Disney initially anticipated. Rachel Zegler's outspoken commentary, the wave of fan outrage, and the subsequent fallout all served as a glaring reminder. Audiences value authentic enchantment over forced reinvention. Now, with a second reboot on the horizon, Disney is poised to either restore the faith of countless fans or deepen the rift beyond repair. It's a high-stakes gamble that goes beyond typical box office concerns. For a company once hailed as the master of fairy tales, the biggest question remains: can they rekindle that old-school Disney magic in a way that resonates with today's audiences without tearing down what made the original so special? Only time will tell if this new Snow White will triumph as a radiant return to form, or become yet another cautionary example of how not to modernize a classic. One thing is certain though, the world is watching to see whether Disney can indeed deliver the fairest one of all one more time. Until that day arrives, the legacy of Snow White hangs in the balance, waiting for a revival that truly honors the timeless heartbeat of the story that started it all.